What if the person pulling away is actually the one feeling the most? It sounds confusing, but for someone with an avoidant attachment style, love doesn't always look like closeness. Sometimes it looks like distance, silence, or a sudden need for space. While most people move toward love, avoidants often find themselves moving away from it. Not because the feelings aren't real, but because intimacy can feel overwhelming. The challenge is that their actions can send mixed messages. One moment there's warmth and connection, and the next there's distance and withdrawal. But beneath that push and pull dynamic, there are often signs that reveal something much deeper. In this video, we'll explore 5 powerful signs an avoidant is completely in love with you, even if they're running away. One of the most misunderstood behaviors in an avoidant person is the tendency to pull away just when a relationship starts becoming meaningful. To someone on the receiving end, this can feel confusing, frustrating, and even heartbreaking. The natural assumption is that distance means a lack of interest or fading feelings. In many cases, that's true for some people. But with an avoidant attachment style, the situation can be far more complex. Sometimes the very reason they create distance is because the connection has become emotionally significant. When feelings start growing deeper, an avoidant often experiences an internal conflict. On one side is the desire for closeness, affection, and connection. On the other side is a deeply rooted need for emotional safety and independence. As intimacy increases, old fears can become activated. The relationship begins to feel more important, which also means there is more to lose. Instead of moving closer, the instinctive reaction may be to create space. This withdrawal can take many forms. Communication may become less frequent. Plans may be postponed. Emotional conversations may suddenly feel uncomfortable. There might even be periods where they seem distant or distracted. For the person who cares about them, these changes can look like clear signs that the relationship is ending. Yet what often separates an avoidant who genuinely cares from someone who is simply losing interest is what happens next. No matter how much distance is created, they keep finding reasons to reconnect. After taking time away, they reach out again. After becoming emotionally unavailable, they slowly return to the conversation. Even when they appear unsure, the connection never fully disappears. There is a pattern of coming back that repeats itself over time. This behavior isn't always intentional. Many avoidants struggle to understand their own emotional reactions. They may genuinely believe they need distance to regain a sense of control. During that period, they try to convince themselves they are fine on their own, yet the emotional bond remains present. Thoughts return to the person they care about. Memories continue to surface. The desire for connection eventually outweighs the temporary comfort of isolation. What makes this sign so meaningful is that returning requires effort. It would be easier to walk away permanently from a relationship that held little value. It would be easier to let communication fade and move on. Instead, they continue reappearing, checking in, and rebuilding the connection. The cycle may not be ideal, but it reveals that the relationship occupies an important place in their emotional world. Of course, repeatedly coming back should not be confused with unhealthy behavior or a lack of accountability. Healthy relationships still require communication, consistency, and respect. However, when viewed through the lens of avoidant attachment, the act of returning often carries a message that words never fully express. It suggests that despite fears, discomfort, and the urge to run, the connection matters too much to leave behind. Deep down, there is an emotional attachment that continues pulling them back, even when every instinct tells them to create distance. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, vulnerability is rarely easy. Opening up emotionally can feel uncomfortable, risky, and even threatening. While many people naturally share their fears, insecurities, and personal experiences as a relationship grows, avoidants often do the opposite. They learn early on to protect their emotions, keep certain parts of themselves hidden, and rely primarily on themselves rather than others. Because of this, one of the strongest signs of deep love is when they begin revealing pieces of their inner world that very few people ever get to see. At first, these moments may seem small and insignificant. It might be a story about a difficult childhood experience, a painful memory from a past relationship, or an admission of a fear they normally keep private. These disclosures may not happen dramatically or all at once. Instead, they often appear gradually, scattered throughout conversations over weeks or months. Each revelation is like a small crack in a wall that has been carefully built over many years. What makes these moments so meaningful is the level of trust required to share them. Avoidants are often highly skilled at maintaining emotional distance. They can talk about work, hobbies, future plans, and countless everyday topics without revealing what is truly happening beneath the surface. Their private thoughts and emotions are usually protected because exposing them creates a sense of vulnerability they are not accustomed to handling. When someone begins sharing these hidden parts, it signals that they feel safer in your presence than they do with most people. It means they are allowing you access to areas of themselves that are normally off limits. That kind of emotional exposure does not happen by accident. It happens because the relationship has become important enough to challenge long-standing defenses. Another sign of this deeper trust is when they start expressing emotions they would normally keep to themselves. Instead of pretending everything is fine, they may admit feeling overwhelmed, disappointed, anxious, or uncertain. These conversations can feel awkward for them because emotional expression may not come naturally. Yet the willingness to have those conversations at all often reveals how much the connection matters. Sometimes vulnerability also appears through actions rather than words. They may seek your opinion on something personal. They may ask for support during a difficult time instead of handling everything alone. They may share dreams, fears, or future hopes that they rarely discuss with others. These behaviors show a growing willingness to depend on someone emotionally, which is often one of the hardest steps for an avoidant person to take. It's important to understand that this process is rarely linear. There may be moments of openness, followed by periods of withdrawal. After sharing something deeply personal, they might suddenly become distant because the experience feels emotionally intense. This doesn't necessarily mean they regret opening up. More often, it reflects the discomfort that can accompany vulnerability for someone who is not used to it. The key thing to watch for is not how perfectly they express themselves, but whether they continue allowing you into their inner world over time. Every personal story, every honest admission, and every emotional truth they choose to share represents a level of trust that cannot be forced or faked. For an avoidant, revealing the parts of themselves they usually hide is often one of the clearest and most powerful expressions of genuine love. Many people assume that someone with an avoidant attachment style is emotionally detached or indifferent. Because avoidants are often reserved with their feelings, they can appear distant on the surface. They may not constantly express affection, send long emotional messages, or openly talk about how much someone means to them. As a result, it is easy to believe that they are not paying attention. However, one of the most surprising signs of deep love is the way they quietly notice and remember the little things. When an avoidant truly cares, their attention often goes far deeper than their words. They may not always verbalize their feelings, but they observe far more than most people realize. Small details that seem unimportant in the moment often stay with them long after a conversation has ended. A casual comment about a favorite movie, a childhood memory, a future goal, or a personal preference can remain stored in their mind for months. This ability to remember details is significant because attention is a form of emotional investment. People naturally focus on what matters to them. When someone consistently remembers things that others forget, it usually indicates that the relationship occupies an important place in their thoughts. For an avoidant, this can be one of the clearest ways affection is expressed. You may notice this when they bring up something you mentioned long ago. Perhaps they remember an important event you were nervous about and later ask how it went. Maybe they recall your favorite food and suggest it without being reminded. They might remember a personal goal you shared and check in on your progress weeks later. These actions may seem small, but they reveal that your words carried meaning. What makes this especially important is that avoidants often communicate care through actions rather than emotional declarations. While someone else might frequently say, "I care about you," an avoidant may show that same feeling by paying close attention to the details of your life. Their memory becomes a quiet demonstration of affection. Beyond remembering facts, they also tend to notice emotional patterns. They may recognize when your mood changes, even if you have not openly discussed it. They might sense when something is bothering you or when you seem unusually stressed. Because avoidants often spend a great deal of time observing before speaking, they can become surprisingly aware of subtle changes in the people they care about. Another reason this sign matters is that it requires mental and emotional space. Remembering details means that thoughts about you continue even when you are not together. It suggests that conversations are being replayed, experiences are being reflected upon, and your presence remains active in their mind. Someone who feels indifferent rarely invests that level of attention. Of course, remembering details alone does not automatically prove love. Some people simply have excellent memories. The difference is found in the consistency and intention behind it. When an avoidant repeatedly recalls meaningful information, uses that knowledge to support you, and demonstrates awareness of your experiences, it often reflects a deeper emotional connection. In many ways, these small moments reveal what words sometimes cannot. Every remembered preference, every recalled conversation, and every thoughtful observation tells a story. It shows that despite appearing distant at times, they are paying attention. And when an avoidant consistently pays attention to the details of your life, it is often because your presence has become far more important to them than they are willing or able to openly admit. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, independence is more than just a personality trait. It is often a source of comfort, security, and emotional protection. Many avoidants have spent years relying on themselves and creating a life where they feel in control of their personal space, routines, and decisions. Because of this, they tend to be very selective about who they allow into their private world. That is why one of the strongest signs of deep love is when they begin making room for you in areas of life they normally keep to themselves. At first, this change may not seem dramatic. It might start with small invitations into their daily routine. They may begin sharing how their day went, discussing plans for the week, or including you in activities they usually prefer to do alone. These moments can appear ordinary on the surface, but for an avoidant, they often represent a significant shift in trust and emotional openness. Many avoidants value their personal space because it gives them a sense of stability. Their routines, hobbies, and private interests can feel like safe zones where they don't have to navigate emotional vulnerability. When they start inviting someone into those spaces, they are essentially saying that your presence no longer feels like a threat to their independence. Instead, it begins to feel like a welcome addition to their life. Another important sign is when they start considering you in their decisions. Avoidants often make choices independently without seeking much input from others. However, when they are deeply invested in a relationship, they may begin asking for your opinion, discussing future plans, or thinking about how certain decisions could affect you. This shift indicates that the relationship has become important enough to factor into their personal world. You may also notice that they become more willing to introduce you to people who matter to them. Whether it is close friends, family members, or trusted acquaintances, these introductions often carry more significance than they might seem. Avoidants are usually cautious about blending different areas of their life. Bringing someone into those circles often means they see the relationship as meaningful and lasting. Future-oriented conversations can be another powerful indicator. Someone who values independence and emotional distance may avoid talking about long-term possibilities unless the connection truly matters. When they begin discussing future trips, upcoming events, shared goals, or plans that naturally include you, it often reflects a growing sense of commitment. They are no longer viewing life solely through the lens of me, but are beginning to think in terms of us. What makes this sign particularly meaningful is that it involves risk from their perspective. Allowing someone into a carefully protected world requires trust. It means accepting the possibility of emotional dependence, disappointment, or vulnerability, experiences avoidants often work hard to avoid. Yet when love becomes strong enough, many are willing to take that risk despite their fears. This process usually happens gradually rather than all at once. There may be moments where they move closer and moments where they pull back. That inconsistency can be confusing, but the overall pattern is what matters. If they continue creating space for you in their routines, decisions, relationships, and future plans, it reveals something important. When an avoidant starts making room for you in a life that was once designed around self-reliance, it is rarely accidental. It often means that you have become part of their comfort zone rather than a disruption to it. And for someone who fiercely protects their independence, that can be one of the clearest signs of genuine and lasting love. Perhaps the most powerful sign that an avoidant is deeply in love is something that often goes unnoticed. It is not found in grand romantic gestures, constant communication, or dramatic declarations of affection. Instead, it appears in a quiet internal struggle, a battle between the desire for connection and the instinct to create distance. When an avoidant begins fighting against long-standing patterns in order to maintain a relationship, it often reveals feelings that run much deeper than words can express. Avoidant attachment patterns usually develop over many years. For a long time, emotional self-protection may have felt necessary. Depending on others may have seemed uncomfortable, vulnerability may have felt risky, and too much closeness may have triggered anxiety. As a result, withdrawing from emotional situations became a familiar coping mechanism. Whenever feelings became intense, creating distance often felt safer than staying present. The challenge arises when genuine love enters the picture. Love naturally requires emotional exposure. It asks people to trust, depend on one another, and allow themselves to be seen. For an avoidant, these experiences can feel both desirable and frightening at the same time. One part of them wants the closeness, while another part wants to retreat from it. This creates a conflict that can be exhausting and confusing. What makes this sign so meaningful is the willingness to stay engaged despite that discomfort. Instead of completely shutting down, they continue making an effort. They may struggle, stumble, or occasionally retreat, but they keep trying to remain connected. That effort often represents a level of emotional commitment that is difficult for outsiders to fully appreciate. For example, difficult conversations can be especially challenging for avoidants. Emotional discussions may trigger the urge to withdraw or change the subject. Yet when they genuinely care, they often push themselves to stay in those conversations longer than they normally would. Even if they are uncomfortable, they attempt to listen, communicate, and work through issues rather than immediately walking away. Another sign of this internal battle is the willingness to confront personal fears. Many avoidants are aware of certain patterns in their relationships. They may recognize tendencies to create distance, avoid vulnerability, or struggle with emotional expression. When they start actively working on those habits, it often reflects a desire to protect the relationship rather than protect themselves alone. Growth can also appear in small but meaningful ways. They may become more open about their feelings, more consistent in communication, or more willing to seek reassurance when needed. These changes may not happen overnight, and progress is rarely perfect. However, every effort to move beyond old defenses demonstrates a willingness to prioritize connection over comfort. It's important to understand that this process often involves setbacks. There may be moments when fear wins and distance returns. There may be times when emotional walls go back up. The presence of these struggles does not necessarily mean the feelings are weak. In many cases, it means they are confronting deeply ingrained habits that cannot disappear instantly. The true sign lies in persistence. Despite fears, uncertainty, and emotional discomfort, they continue showing up. They continue trying to make the relationship work. They continue choosing connection, even when every instinct encourages withdrawal. When an avoidant actively fights against patterns that once kept people at a distance, it reveals something profound. It shows that the relationship has become valuable enough to challenge years of emotional self-protection. And for someone who naturally seeks safety through distance, Choosing closeness again and again can be one of the strongest expressions of love possible. One of the most difficult truths to understand about avoidant attachment is that love and distance can exist at the same time. Most people are taught to view love through visible expressions of closeness: frequent communication, emotional openness, physical affection, and a strong desire to spend time together. Because of this, when someone pulls away or struggles to stay emotionally connected, it is easy to assume that the feelings simply are not there. However, for an avoidant person, the situation is often far more complicated. The mistake many people make is believing that emotional behavior always reflects emotional depth. In reality, some of the people who feel the most deeply are also the ones who have the hardest time expressing those feelings. An avoidant may experience strong love, attachment, and care while simultaneously feeling overwhelmed by the vulnerability those emotions create. The stronger the feelings become, the more intense the fear of emotional exposure can feel. This creates an internal contradiction. They want connection, yet they fear dependence. They value closeness, yet they worry about losing their independence. They care deeply, yet they struggle to show it consistently. These opposing forces can make their behavior seem confusing from the outside. One moment they appear fully engaged, and the next they seem distant or withdrawn. What is important to recognize is that emotional struggle does not automatically mean emotional absence. In many cases, the struggle exists precisely because the feelings are significant. If the relationship did not matter, there would be no conflict to manage. There would be no fear of loss, no concern about vulnerability, and no emotional tension. The very fact that they wrestle with these feelings can sometimes indicate how important the connection has become. This often explains why avoidance may seem different from what people expect. They might not constantly verbalize their emotions. They may not always know how to provide reassurance in the moment. They may need more space than other people. Yet beneath those behaviors, there can still be a genuine emotional attachment that remains steady and real. Love is not always expressed through dramatic declarations. Sometimes it appears through quiet actions. It can be seen in the effort to stay connected despite discomfort. It can be found in the way they remember details, support your goals, check in after creating distance, or slowly allow you into parts of their life that were once private. These actions often reveal emotions that words fail to communicate. Understanding this distinction is important because many relationships suffer when distance is immediately interpreted as indifference. While unhealthy behavior should never be ignored or excused, it is also important to recognize that emotional expression varies from person to person. Some individuals show love naturally and openly. Others carry fears that make love more difficult to express, even when the feelings themselves are very strong. The clearest sign is not perfection, but persistence. Despite moments of uncertainty, despite the instinct to retreat, and despite the discomfort that intimacy sometimes creates, they continue finding ways to maintain the connection. They continue caring, investing, and trying in their own imperfect way. When someone struggles to stay close, yet repeatedly chooses the relationship anyway, it often reveals a powerful truth. The distance you see may be part of an internal battle, but the fact that they keep returning, keep trying, and keep making room for the connection can be evidence that the love underneath is very real.